Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Justice Southbury's 289th consecutive weekly rally for social justice. Today is December 7, which is the 84th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. And I assume some of you have been there before, as I have. When you're there, you're directed to look down at the USS Arizona, and it's a very stirring memorial, and it's somber and beautiful. But I always, I've been there a couple of times, and I like to look back when I'm there. And you're in the harbor, and the beautiful sea is in front of you. But when you look back, you see the hills, and those are the hills where the Japanese fighter bombers came over, with no notice, came swooping over the hills and down into the harbor. So when you are there, it's really eerie because you can visualize that. So it's one of those places in the world where you can really feel the history. Enough of the important details are still preserved that you can squint your eyes and sort of direct your own movie, being right there. Another place that's like that is the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, where the building and its secret annex retain enough of the bones that you can imagine the flesh. As the Japanese were attacking Pearl Harbor 84 years ago, on the other side of the world, 12-year-old Anne Frank had just started her academic year at a new Jewish school because she was now forbidden to attend the Montessori school that she had grown up in. She was 7 months away from going into hiding in December of 1941. If you remember the story, she and her family, her father, mother, and her older sister, had to hide from the Nazis who had come into the Netherlands and were basically going to be exterminating people. Her father owned a business and had a warehouse. And up on the third floor of the warehouse in the back, there was an annex. You could not see the annex from the road because it was an interior building, and all along the perimeter were the exterior buildings. So you couldn't see this annex from elsewhere. So they have behind a bookcase, they cut a hole, the bookcase could come out, and they could go in. And the family stayed in that annex behind the bookcase. Bob mentioned that when you go there, you keep you press buttons and you hear things, you hear the narrative. We were just there 2 weeks ago. Kathy and I went when we were visiting Anna and Sindri there, and when you go through, you get you pay for the little headphone thing, and you go to the first part of the warehouse and you push number 1 and you listen, and it gives you a narrative about what happened in that part of the warehouse, and number 2, and you get through it. And I stopped listening to the one I was on as I was a little behind everybody because I'm very slow going through these things and thinking about everything. But when you go through the bookcase, and I walk through into the annex, and you kind of hunch down, and I'm looking for the next number, and there's no next number. And I started walking and reading the things on the walls, and I realized that it was silence. Because once you were in there was a warehouse below, and they couldn't trust all of the workers. And so during the day, you had to be silent upstairs in the annex, or that could have given you away. So the way they have this set up is you hear the narratives until you get into the silent spot where they had to be silent. It's very affecting. That was 2 weeks ago. And so 2 rallies ago, Jeremy related the slave narrative of Jordan Anderson, who, years after gaining his freedom, Mr. Anderson wrote a letter to his old master about his bondage. And Jordan used the phrase, "It would do me good." And having just been to the Anne Frank Museum and home that morning, that phrase really struck me. It would do me good. Because when I heard a former slave say, "It would do me good," it made me think about those who would say, well, because of who you are or what class you belong to, frankly, I don't give a damn if it would do you good. Many people in the 19th century didn't care if something would do a slave good. Many people in 20th century Europe didn't care if something would do a young Jewish girl good. And here we are again, when many people in 21st century America don't care if something would do certain classes of people good. This week, our president said that people from Somalia, quote, stink and we don't want them in our country, end quote. He called a U.S. representative who came to the U.S. from Somalia as a refugee and who became an American citizen 25 years ago. He called her garbage. He said, quote, we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking garbage into our country. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people who work. These aren't people who say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great, end quote. Some people excuse this kind of rhetoric, saying that, well, when he calls people garbage, or he calls women stupid or piggy, he's just speaking his mind. He's being transparent. But I'd like to spend a couple of minutes in the cold here, focusing on the effect of calling a whole group of people garbage, or as saying that they come from whole countries. This is the ugliest side of the opposition to DEI. I've spoken many times before about my own spin on DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. That we all know that variety is the spice of life. We all know from the time we're little and we're complaining to mommy about something, we all know the difference between what's fair and what's not fair. We all have mats at the entry of our house that say, welcome. So variety, fairness, welcome. That's diversity, equity, inclusion. That's DEI. And I've said that before. But let's look at it from the other side. What is it not? Who wants spice? Variety, it's confusing, it's challenging. Let's have the same. Let's have homogeneity. Let's eliminate differences. Fairness? Well, that means I've got to give up something for someone else. I'm in it for me. Welcome, Matt? I want to go away, Matt. The opposite of DEI, sameness, self-focus, exclusion. My group, no others, because they're too othery, too different, too much less than me or less than us. This is the spirit that animates the statement that headlined many stories this week about our president's "their garbage" tirade. He said, quote, we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from, end quote. Let them go back to where they came from. This exclusionary attitude has a unfortunately rich, if awful, history here in America. I often call attention to the fact that as a white, straight, able-bodied, raised Christian, well-off white male, I've never faced anything that I consider to be discrimination. But I have to make a confession. Shudder, shudder. I have both Irish and German blood. I'm only 50% English. And my stepfather was Italian. For shame. 100 to 150 years ago, in the era of no Irish need apply, many native-born Americans criticized Irish immigrants for their poverty, their manners, their supposed laziness, their lack of discipline, their criminality. Sound familiar? In that era, many wrote that Germans would not assimilate into U.S. society. They were barbaric Huns with low levels of education and few skills. And Italians? Bandits, black-eyed and wicked. A witness at an 1891 congressional committee testified that, quote, you don't call an Italian a white man, end quote. China peril, Japanese internment camps. Mexicans are murderers and rapists. Muslims want to impose Sharia law on our country. There is great historical, I don't mean great like good, I mean great like too much, historical precedent for the ugly othering of classes of people in a way that excludes them from consideration as individuals, with all of our glory and all of our flaws that make us human. So it was just part of this kind of thinking that produced a recommendation from the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security this week that the administration should enact, quote, a full travel ban on every damn country that's been flooding our nation with killers, leeches, and entitlement junkies, end quote. Writing this week about these comments from our president and his cabinet, a professor at the University of Chicago who studies political violence said that such language is dangerous. Quote, "They're not just nasty metaphors. They're especially dehumanizing metaphors. Garbage. You're not thinking of something that is human. You're thinking of it as something that can be easily thrown away. So that is exactly the kind of metaphor we have found for decades is likely to increase support for violence." End quote. When you tell a country that others are not others, but are less than us others, you prepare that country to do something about those others. And sometimes the ending is catastrophic. The Anne Frank story, therefore, illuminates both the worst and the best of humanity. The worst part of humankind, the human unkindness, has plenty of examples, none more hate-filled and destructive than that of the Holocaust. Man has the capacity to treat others cruelly, and it starts not with the ultimate violence, but with the predicates of hatred and othering, the opposition to the beautiful diversity and equity and inclusion that makes us all different and special. Judging people by one aspect of their being, especially if that one aspect is not something that they can change, like being LGBTQ, or black, or Hispanic, or Asian, or non-Christian, or female. Judging them on that basis alone is limiting and narrow-minded and unfair and does nothing to improve this big, messy world we live in. As a Jew who hid from the Nazis and then died in the Holocaust, Anne Frank was a victim of that worst of humanity. But she was also a unique example of the best of humankind, the kindness of humankind. She was a remarkable writer, an optimistic soul, who made the most of the tragic limitations which bound her last few years. In her final diary entry, July 15, 1944, just a few weeks before her arrest, and shortly after D-Day, Anne Frank wrote, quote, "I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right, that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again," end quote. Anne Frank's spirit, in the face of such horror, was not just an allegory. She was a real person in a real tragedy. And imagine how many other potential Anne Franks are out there, being bullied by those who scorn their skin color, or who feel threatened by their sexual orientation, being separated from their parents by masked agents. How many other Anne Franks are out there? So many who will not keep diaries of their treatment, whose voices will never be heard, whose hiding places will never be memorialized as museums of the best and worst of humanity. At the foundation of all of this are two central questions. What do we want our world to look like? And what are we prepared to do about it? For this group of Justice Southbury, the answers are clear. Our vision is a more fair and kind community for all. Fair means fair for all. Kind means kindness to all. And all means all. When we say love your neighbor, implied in that is a persistent determination to join our neighbors, all of them willing to do so, to love our neighbors, all of them. The best of humanity is a lot more difficult than the worst of humanity. It's easier to hate than to love, easier to criticize than to try to understand, easier to say, oh, I already know everything I need to know, than to say, I want to learn more. My favorite Anne Frank quote could have been written for Justice Southbury. Quote, "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. So let's not wait another single moment before continuing to try to improve the world. And if Anne Frank can't get you fired up and ready to go, I don't know who can. So if you are still, after 289 weeks, fired up and ready to go, let me know. Fired up?
Fired up!
Ready to go?
Ready to go!
Fired up?
Fired up!
Ready to go?
Ready to go!
Let's go change the world, and let's not wait another single moment before starting to improve the world. Thank you, Anne Frank. Thank you for coming, and thank you all for showing that hate has no home here in Southbury. Thanks.
Yeah!